I never imagined my life would change when a storm forced a CEO into my home. The sky had torn itself apart that evening, as if the heavens were angry, wailing with the wind that whipped against my windows. I was alone, heart racing, a knot in my stomach. Rain lashed at the glass like 1,000 manic fingers, rhythmic and terrifying. And then there was a knock. It echoed through the chaos, a sound that seemed entirely out of place. I hesitated. Who would be out there? My trembling hands reached for the door handle, my pulse thrumming in my ears. Deep breath. I opened it just a crack. He stood there, drenched and disheveled, a soaked suit clinging to his frame. His eyes, wide and desperate, haunted me. "Please," he gasped, "I need shelter." In that moment, something shifted. This man was no ordinary stranger, he was Richard Lang, the CEO of the company my father worked for, the man whose name I had seen on countless headlines. A figure so powerful, yet here he was at my door, on the edge of collapse, so human. I stepped aside, heart pounding. He stumbled in, a wave of warm, wet air filling my home. A rush of emotions surged within me: fear, curiosity, an undeniable thrill. I could almost hear the storm raging outside, a sinister orchestra that laid the stage for something beyond my understanding. He was shaking, and I instinctively reached for a towel, my hands brushing against his, electric. I could feel the tension in the room thickening, an unspoken tension that felt surreal. "They're looking for me," he breathed, and that simple admission tightened my chest. Looking into his eyes, I could sense layers upon layers of stories, secrets bubbling just beneath the surface. I wanted to dig deeper, but I could feel my heart protesting against the weight of his revelation. This wasn't just a man seeking refuge from a storm. There was something darker lurking just outside my front door. His phone buzzed violently on the table. He glanced at it, terror tracing his features. "I have to go," he muttered, but the storm howled louder, as if warning him not to leave. What could be so terrifying that he would risk a dangerous storm over it? What whispers of danger were clinging to his mind? Before I could say anything, he turned toward the door, panic etched into every line of his face. But I couldn't let him go, not like this, not yet. "Wait!" I called, but just as the word left my lips, the power flickered and then the whole house plunged into darkness. I was alone with Richard and the storm. My heart raced. What had I gotten myself into? Silence fell like a blanket, broken only by the relentless pounding of rain. All I could think was, this was only the beginning. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The storm raged on outside, a symphony of chaos that mirrored the tempest churning in my mind. The darkness swallowed the room, save for the sporadic flashes of lightning casting pale silhouettes against the walls. Richard's breath quickened in the thick air, and even in the shadowy gloom, I could see his shoulders tensed, a coiled spring ready to break. "Please, I can't," he began, voice strained with urgency. "I have to go." But as he turned towards the door, the sound of the wind tore through the silence, as wild as the thoughts racing in my head. I couldn't lose him, not to that storm, and certainly not to whatever threat he was fleeing from. "Richard, wait." I stepped forward, the floor creaking beneath my weight. In that moment, fueled by a strange blend of fear and something deeper, I reached out and grasped his arm. His skin felt warm against the cold reality of my own panic. "You can't go out there. Not like this." He paused, his gaze flitting from my hand on his arm to my eyes, a mosaic of confusion and longing. "You don't understand," he murmured, his eyes searching mine for an understanding I wasn't sure I possessed. "I can't stay here. They'll find me. They always find me." "Who?" The question escaped my lips before I could filter it, but the intensity of his expression drove me forward. There was vulnerability in him, a crack in the armor of the man who had long been cast as untouchable, unshakable. He inhaled sharply, as if the answer burned in his throat. "People who want to silence me. Who want." His voice shook, and he stepped closer, edging back into the warm confines of my living room that felt increasingly like a sanctuary cloaked in dread. "Silence you? Why?" The words tumbled out, a mix of fear and fascination. Richard hesitated, his eyes darting toward the window where the rain splattered against the glass like frantic hands begging for refuge. "For asking questions," he finally said, each word carefully weighed. "For uncovering truths that powerful people want buried." There was a heaviness about his tone, a darkness that seemed to draw me in despite the alarm bells ringing in my head. "What kind of truths?" I asked, intrigued yet terrified by the mere thought of being dragged into his world, the world of charts, boardrooms, and unseen manipulation. He took a step back, conflicted. "I wish I could tell you, but it's not safe. Not for you, not for anyone around me." His eyes flickered with something that felt like regret. "I shouldn't have come here. You shouldn't have opened that door." The storm's roar outside intensified, as if in response, taming the darkness momentarily with each crack of thunder. In that stunning illumination, I saw his face fragile and beautiful, haunted by shadows I could only begin to understand. Just then, as if the universe was conspiring against us, a shattering crash interrupted our moment. A large tree branch split from its trunk under the weight of the storm and slammed into the windowsill, showering shards of glass against the floor. In an instant, the protective bubble around us burst, and I instinctively sprang toward him, our bodies colliding in the darkness. "Are you okay?" I gasped, adrenaline coursing through my veins as I realized how close we were, his breath warm against my cheek, both of us suspended in the chaos. "I'm fine, but we need to move." His urgency snapped me back to reality as he began to pull away. The moment tinged with an unsettling familiarity, danger and attraction blurred in a terrifying dance. Just as we stumbled toward the hallway, I heard it, voices rising, sharp and demanding, piercing through the cacophony of the storm. My heart sank like an anchor. They were here. Somehow, they had found him. "Richard," I whispered, my voice brittle with fear. "We can't let them in. What do we do?" With each word, my grasp on reality slipped further. The confines of my home suddenly felt like a trap closing in around us. His jaw tightened, eyes narrowing as he scanned our immediate surroundings. "You have to trust me. We need to find a way out now." The urgency in his voice was both thrilling and terrifying, igniting something inside me that I couldn't quite control. My world spiraled in that moment. I was thrust into a whirlwind of peril, caught between the storm outside and the threats closing in. I clutched his hand tightly, determination surging through the fear. Somehow, I knew that even if the unfolding chaos shattered my life, I wasn't ready to let go of this moment, this man. "Where do we go?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt, and he pulled me closer, guiding me into the shadows. Just as we made our way toward the back of the house, another crash echoed outside, raw and unforgiving. Just then, his phone buzzed again, and I caught a glimpse of the screen before he could silence it. A message, one that sent chills racing down my spine. "You're not safe. They're here, Richard. Get out now." My heart dropped as Richard's face paled, the weight of that revelation lurking just behind his haunted eyes. A decision hung in the air between us, heavy and unfathomable, and in that moment, I realized the storm might be the least of our worries. The howling winds grew louder, mingling with the pounding in my chest, creating a frantic symphony that surged around us. Richard's breath was a whisper against the tempest, but the message on his phone had echoed like thunder in my soul. I felt the icy fingers of dread curl around my heart as he turned to me, the urgency of the moment crystal clear in his darkening eyes. "We have to go now," he insisted, his grip tightening on my hand as he led me through the dim hallway. The shadows cast by flickering candles danced around us, creating ghostly figures on the walls. Each step echoed with a fragile tension, a silent prayer to whatever forces governed our fate. And that bleak moment, our solitude was interrupted by the sharp crack of glass behind us as another tree limb slammed into the house. I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to see something monstrous emerge from the depths of the storm, an unwelcome guest, perhaps, but instead, I felt the shroud of silence thicken around us. Richard's thumb traced gentle circles on my palm, a gesture so intimate that it pierced through the chaos momentarily. "Focus," he urged, though I saw the tightness around his eyes betraying his fear. He wasn't talking just to me, I could sense he was reassuring himself as well. That we slipped through the kitchen toward the back door, where the storm rattled the frame ominously, but just as we reached for it, we froze. Outside, men garbed in dark raincoats began to materialize, their shadows expansive beneath the intermittent lightning flashes. They were searching, desperate, methodical. I stifled a gasp as dread washed over me. "Can you hear them?" I whispered, my heart racing. "What if they come in here?" Richard's face hardened, resolve flooding his features. "They won't. As long as we stay quiet," he murmured, though a flicker of doubt danced in his eyes. "We could escape through the back alley. It's narrow enough that they might suddenly." A loud bang erupted at the front of the house, and a surge of adrenaline sent my pulse racing. The unmistakable sound of a boot striking the door reverberated through the dark, the modern framework of my home suddenly feeling antiquated against the force pressing upon it. It was an invitation to chaos, and I could feel Richard's hesitation as he weighed our options. "Go," he urged, pushing me ahead of him toward the kitchen door. "I'll hold them off." "No." I spun around, desperation clawing at the edges of my voice. "We stick together. We can't separate now." But he met my eyes with an intensity that nearly cut through the noise of the storm. "If they know I'm here, they'll come for you too. You have to trust me, please." The urgency in his voice was as piercing as the wind outside, yet there was an undertow of something else, something far more tender, a vulnerability masked by his bravado. "Then let us not waste time," I said, trembling as I made the decision for us both. Our need for survival lit a fire within me, forging a bond that transcended the fear consuming us. "Together. We go together." With a conflicted nod, he moved forward, each step resonating with resolve. The rain poured outside like a vile torrent, as we finally pushed through the kitchen door and into the storm's embrace. The cold raindrops met our skin like icy needles, yet adrenaline coursed through my veins, keeping me warm against the surging panic. Together, we slipped into the narrow alley that ran alongside the house, the cobblestones slick with rain. The vicious wind howled just above us, and somewhere beyond, I could hear muffled voices barking commands. But when Richard halted just beyond the shelter of the house, my heart raced with anticipation. "What now?" I breathed, looking up at him. "Do we wait for them to pass?" "No," he said, urgency draping his tone. "We have to move now while we still have an advantage." He scanned the street, his expression tense. "Follow me." As we darted across the alley, I couldn't shake the thought of the risks ahead. I could feel a looming sense of dread, but just as I was about to voice my concerns, a dazzled light blinked across. Richard's face, a fleeting, hopeful expression taking form one moment before he grasped my arm, pulling me to a halt. "Look," he said, his voice softer, tinged with caution. I followed his gaze, and there was a flickering light from across the street that led into a small old bookstore whose sign bobbed in the turbulent rain, "Open." Without a second thought, he grasped my hand tighter, propelling us forward toward the sanctuary of those shelves filled with words. Yet, as we neared the entrance, Richard stopped suddenly, his eyes wide in alarm as if something had seized his breath. "What is it?" I whispered, fear clawing back toward the surface. His gaze was fixed on the bookstore window, his expression a mixture of horror and disbelief. They're here. They're already inside." In that instant, the storm outside intensified, echoing like a war drum that matched the frantic beating of my heart. I could only watch helplessly as Richard moved into action, the impending doom closing in around us, the small flicker of light we sought transforming into the very nightmare we wished to escape. Richard's grip on my hand tightened as reality crashed down like the storm overhead. The flickering light, our beacon of hope, was now a reminder of peril creeping in too close for comfort. He drew me back, our breaths shaky and laden with unspoken fears. "No, we can't go in there," he said, urgency pulling at his features. "They might have seen us." My heart sank, the warmth within me snuffed out by the chill of dread that gripped my spine. "What are we going to do, Richard? The street is exposed, and those men—" my voice faltered, the panic threatening to bubble forth. He took a deep breath, trying to shield me from his own rising desperation. "This storm will wait it out. They won't last forever." He scanned the empty street, his expression masked in determination. I nodded, though doubt lingered in my heart. But before I could even breathe in my resolve, an all too familiar voice sliced through the din of rain and thunder. "Richard! I know you're out there. Come on, kid. Don't make this harder than it has to be." My blood turned to ice as the voice pierced the wind. I recognized that tone, sharp, commanding, chilling. It was Peter, the very man whose shadow hung over Richard, molding both his present and future like a dark cloud. Richard's jaw clenched, the fight draining from his features. "We can't let them find us. We need to move," he urged, though I felt a tremor beneath his bravado. "Where?" The word escaped my lips, laced with an edginess that nearly drowned me. Every direction seemed fraught with danger. "Back toward the alley," his voice trailed off as another sound broke through laughter juxtaposed with the heavy footsteps. The faltering light inside the bookstore shimmered under the violent bursts of the storm, a frail sanctuary that felt so precarious in that moment. "Wait," I whispered, spotting movement behind the bookstore's damp window. A shadow hovered, another figure emerging slowly into the flickering light. I squinted, trying to draw clarity from the encroaching chaos. "Please don't notice, please," I chanted silently, my pulse racing as I realized what I was witnessing. The figure stepped closer, the glint of a badge catching the light. A police officer. My heart leapt and sank simultaneously. "Help," I mouthed to Richard, a fragile thread of hope woven through my despair. "It could be a trap," he cautioned, but suddenly the urgency shifted. The voices grew louder, Peter barking orders around the bookstore entrance. "We have no time. We need to make a run for it." "Wait." I tugged at his arm just as realization surfaced in my mind. What if we can catch his attention? Richard's eyes flicked from me to the officer on the other side of the street. "They're looking for us, Claudia." "If you shout, my voice can't carry over this storm," I interrupted, desperation clawing at my throat. "But we could find a way to signal him. This window. If we create enough movement." "What are you thinking?" His tone was edged with disbelief, yet beneath it lay a flicker of hope reigniting in the depths of his eyes. "Just trust me," I urged, adrenaline thrumming beneath my skin. As loud as the storm raged, it still felt quieter than the pounding of my heart. We slipped into the narrow alleyway adjacent to the bookstore, where the rain fell in sheets, soaking our clothes through. As he held me tight, the world felt suffocating, but in that tight embrace, an unexpected warmth flared. "Claudia, if this goes wrong, you need to promise me you will keep yourself safe." There was a tinge of something unsaid, hanging between us like an anchored promise. I nodded, understanding the layers of his words, knowing I could only give him my unyielding trust. "Just stay close." I shifted in position, drawing Richard with me as I began to scuff our message into the dirt, a simple plea, help with jagged lines that swept across the soaked earth at our feet. That I glanced back toward him, his eyes flickering between fear and admiration as the officer's figure moved closer, the badge bobbing lightly against the storm's rhythm. Richard lifted his hand, forming a shield to protect. Our signal from the rain that fell in arduous torrents. That I craned my neck, my heart lurching as I tried to discern the officer's stance, the shadows obscuring my view. Yet, as if the universe was toying with my resolve, I stumbled on the wetted stones, slipping momentarily as panic surged within me. "Stay still!" Richard snapped, gripping my arm tightly, the hint of warmth anchoring me amidst the chaos. And then I saw it, a flicker of recognition, the officer's gaze breaking free from its focused intensity. He turned, his attention drawn by the movements in the shadows, and in that fleeting moment, hope surged anew. But the laughter of Peter rang out again, stark and cutting, as he drew closer. "Don't let him leave. I know he's nearby." Suddenly, it was as if the storm itself shifted, dragging us into the turbulent currents of fate we desperately tried to escape. Richard's expression darkened, caught between two impossible choices. "Now," he urged, pulling me fiercely toward the officer, who backed away, already striding into the storm, an urgency mirrored in his every movement. My heart sank as recognition washed away his purpose, and I knew all was not well. Just as I reached out, my voice caught in my throat. "Please, we need," but another crack of thunder erupted, drowning my words as Richard stumbled, pulling me down with him. We fell into a heap on the slick ground, water pooling beneath us, the darkness pressing in with the ever-increasing ferocity of the storm. "We have to go now," Richard shouted, the edges of desperation threading through his voice. With Peter's men closing in from behind, and the tenuous thread of salvation slipping further away, I felt reality crashing down once more, and then came the shattering realization. A flicker of the past swept through Richard's expression, his gaze lost in the deluge of flashes, and a whisper of a second chance hung in the air, just as heavy yet fleeting as the storm. "Claudia, we're going to need more than luck to survive tonight," he breathed, his eyes a storm of emotion, worry, fear, but also something more. But just as the moment crumbled in hesitation, an angry roar of thunder overhead shook the very ground we lay on, pulling the world into even sharper focus. And as I turned my gaze back toward the road, where shadows began to converge, it occurred to me that this was only the beginning of a deeper storm, one that threatened to unearth secrets long buried and ties that could unravel everything we thought we knew. The alley swallowed us in darkness, a temporary refuge from the chaos, but the sound of heavy boots trudging through the rain was a constant reminder of our predicament. Richard's breath came in fast bursts, the desperation in his eyes matching the storm raging above us. My heart raced, not just with fear but with something more, a flicker of determination ignited by our shared struggle, the sense of unity in our desperation. "We can't wait any longer," I urged, my voice trembling. The flicker of hope I had seen in Richard's gaze was slowly being encased in doubt. "We have to try to get his attention again. Claudia," he said, his tone softened but firm, "if they've already found out about us, it's not just the officer we have to worry about. We have to think strategically." He glanced over his shoulder, then back to me. "What if we ambush them? Draw them away from the officer?" The idea sent a thrill of panic through me, but deep down, I knew we had to act before Peter's men closed in. "How do you propose we do that?" Richard's lips pressed into a thin line, his eyes narrowing as he searched the alley for solutions. "We can create a diversion. Use the shadows. The noise from the storm will cover our movements." Even as I nodded, a rush of uncertainty flowed through me. "And if they catch us?" The implications were dire, the weight of our choices heavy upon us. "They won't," he promised, though I saw the uncertainty flicker in his eyes. "We have to trust each other." "Okay," I breathed out, feeling the urgency internalize in my bones. "But we need to be quick. The officer could leave at any moment." Moments later, we emerged from our shelter into the torrential downpour, the rain stinging my face as if reminding me of the peril we chose to face. Richard pulled me closer, our shoulders brushing as we moved along the edge of the street, hearts synchronized in silent calculation. Just then, a loud crash sounded from a nearby dumpster, reverberating in the night's tempest. Richard paused, looking down into the alley where the sound had come from. "You stay here," he instructed, his voice low and in charge. "No, I'm moving with you," I retorted, the stubbornness in me igniting. What good was safety if I was left isolated? He didn't argue this time but nodded curtly, and together, we skittered down toward the dumpster. The wind whipped through our hair, soaking us to the bone, but adrenaline fluttered in my veins, battling the chill. As we reached the dumpster, I saw Richard's eyes narrow at the shadows beyond. He raised a finger to his lips, and I stilled, watching the figures emerge. Two men, obscured by darkness, their silhouettes brimming with intent. My heart beat frantically as they laughed in low, sinister tones, exchanging words I could not catch. "It's them," Richard whispered, his expression shifting from alarm to determination. "We can flank them from behind." "Are you sure?" My voice sounded raw, and the pounding rain drowned out the edges of my fear. "Trust me." It was a plea and a command all at once. With hearts racing, we slipped into the darkness at the alley's mouth, skirting the edges of their vision, our breaths silent against the cacophony of storm sounds around us. The rain started to lighten, but the tension hung in the air thickly, weighing us down like a weighted blanket. With every quiet step I took, I felt the weight of the moment, months of hiding, of fear, and of yearning for a different life, all converging into this singular point. Then, as if the storm itself had turned against us, the men motioned toward the officer across the street, their boisterous laughter spiraling into an alarming silence. One of them pointed, their gaze fixed back down the alley. "Go around." "Yes, right there." Panic surged within me, urging action as we were thrust into the chaos of impending danger. I clenched my fists to suppress it. "What are we going to do?" "Follow my lead, and when I say run, you don't look back." The men turned their backs to us, and in that opening, Richard slipped ahead, and I followed closely, hearts pounding in synchronization. "Now!" Richard shouted, our feet pounding against the slick ground as we darted toward the officer, the shadows of Peter's men clawing at our heels. That we surged forward, calling out to the officer who seemed oblivious still, lost in the fury of the storm. "Hey! Officer!" I called, voice rising above the rain. The officer turned, eyes widening, shock blossoming across his face as he took in the sight of us, two drenched and desperate souls rushing towards him. To my horror, the laughter of Peter's men echoed sharply behind us. Richard tugged me close. "Keep going." But as we reached the edge of safety, a piercing sound, a gunshot, reverberated through the night, cracking through the storm, and everything froze. The rain seemed to halt, our lives suspended in that one moment as we turned back toward the approaching danger. And just like that, everything changed. A harried shout from the officer pierced the air, followed by a rush of footfalls. I felt Richard's grip slip as he turned toward the source of the noise, instinctual and driven by a force I barely understood. "Richard!" I screamed, feeling a new kind of dread welled within me, awakening the shadows of despair that thrived in the corridors of the mind. "Get back!" But he shoved me forward, eyes fierce and unyielding. "Go! I'll hold them off." The command was a fierce storm of its own, cutting through the tumult around us. Time fell away in the maelstrom of moment, and just as I faltered, I watched as he faced the approaching men, wide-eyed and determined to protect her against the tide of chaos threatening to sweep us both into oblivion. But as I plunged toward the officer, a truth cracked the surface of my mind, one that threatened to unravel everything I thought I knew. I'd been running toward safety, but as their chaos unraveled before me, I realized that my escape was only just beginning, and the storm was far from over. The air was saturated with tension, a thick fog of uncertainty rolling in like the storm clouds that had engulfed the night. Fear churned in my stomach as I raced toward the officer, my heart pounding, but Richard's fierce stare burned into my memory like a beacon of bravery I longed to emulate. The officer stood frozen for a moment, disbelief carving lines into his face as I shouted desperately, "Help us! They're coming!" My words fell into the rain like stones into the abyss, swallowed up instantly by the relentless downpour. His eyes darted back toward the alley, where shadows moved like phantoms, and I felt the frantic pulse of time quicken. "Get behind me!" he barked, taking a step toward me, his weighty presence establishing an uneasy shield. With the rain pelting down, I could barely see the glint of his badge. It became a blur of silver against a backdrop of chaos as echoes of laughter resounded in the distance, taunting. "Where's your partner?" I managed to ask, panic mixing with urgency. His absence stirred a foreboding feeling within me I couldn't quite shake. "Clear the area, stay close," he commanded, gesturing emphatically. I took a tentative step backward, ready to comply, but a surge of instinct pulled me away from safety. "Richard!" I shouted again, but the name evaporated into the air, swept away by the furious wind. A moment passed where the world felt achingly still, the rain settling as the officer's face contorted, caught between duty and a nascent fear. Just then, with a ferocity that made my skin prickle, the shadows exploded into focus. The two figures lurched around the corner of the alley, eyes glittering with a maniacal hunger. My eyes widened as the officer drew his weapon, the metal shining in brief flashes of lightning, and the atmosphere crackled with tension, every heartbeat echoing like thunder in my ears. I darted forward. "No. You can't fight them alone." But he pushed me back, focusing on the advancing threat. "Get to safety. Now." The words stung, blending with the clamoring thud of my heart. What about Richard? I feared finding myself facing this storm alone, as I had so many times before. An uneasy resolve settled in the officer's eyes. "He'll hold them off," he said, though the way he said it steady yet shaken made me wonder if he even believed it himself. That I could glimpse Richard caught in the fray, determined but outnumbered, eyes seething with defiance. A rush of instinct seized me, propelling me toward the fray despite the officer's commands. "You can't just leave him." The officer turned back toward me, a flash of frustration crossing his features. "We don't have time." I hesitated, feeling the primal instinct of flight battle against the chains of loyalty binding me to Richard. In that frantic moment, clarity struck. A decision formed in the chaos. I couldn't abandon him, I had to trust in the bond that had brought us to this point. Without thinking, I pivoted on my heel and pushed against the slick ground, racing back toward the alley. "Claudia!" Richard's voice sliced through the storm, full of warning and overlapping fear. The officer yelled something after me, an order, a plea, but I couldn't hear it over the roar of the rain. As I approached, dread wrapped itself around my chest, squeezing tighter as I realized I'd gambled on a desperation I couldn't afford. The men had encircled him now, their forms dark and imposing against the flickering shadows. I skidded to a halt, the world narrowing around the storm of chaos and adrenaline, as Richard's voice rang out again, louder this time. "Run, Claudia. You need to," but it was too late. Just then, through the chaos, one of the men lunged at Richard, and suddenly everything unfolded in painful slow motion, the glint of a blade shimmering for a split second before time whipped back to normal speed. My heart dropped as I shouted again, a sound forced from the depths of my being. "Richard, watch out!" But before the warning could reach him, there was a blur of motion, and the unthinkable occurred. The officer surged forward, intercepting with a swift action that felt borrowed from another world. He took the blow as Richard stepped back, eyes wide and filled with a nightmare disbelief. The knife gleamed for a moment against the storm's eerie glow, a silent declaration of violence that fractured the night. And then, a piercing scream cut through the air, one that was far too familiar. "Officer!" I cried as the man faltered, the officer falling to his knees. Time seemed to freeze, the rain pouring down in torrents, the world around me blurring into insignificance. My heart raced as the officer's shocked gaze caught mine, a moment of recognition passing between us. And that heartbeat, nature roared. Rain pounded harder, concealing everything in a smothering embrace. A ripple of desperation cracked through my resolve, and the daunting truth hit me like the storm that blanketed the city we were in over our heads, drowning in chaos. Suddenly, Richard turned, but the men were closing in. Their laughter faded into a snarl, blending with the thunder like a dark symphony marching toward our end. I wanted to scream, to cry, to fight, but dread coiled around my heart, stealing away any possibility of hope I dared to cling to. But there, amid the dark, I felt a spark, something small, yet flickering. It crept within me, and I found myself grasping the edge of determination. I may not have had control over the storm, but I had a choice. Together. I shouted, the word resonating between us like a rallying cry against the abyss. Richard's gaze locked onto mine, a fierce resolve igniting as we pressed forward into the fray, hearts entwined in the rush of survival. But as we surged forward, the rain turned to a deluge, and reality shattered once again. "This way!" The officer's voice rang out through the storm, commanding yet weak as he staggered back, and within moments, a new revelation unfurled in the dark. A single figure emerged behind the men, clad in shadows, a specter of menace that chilled my bones. My breath caught, the hair on the back of my neck stood up as I recognized the familiar outline with an unsettling jolt. "Peter!" I gasped, realization crashing over me like a wave, threatening to drown what little hope we had left. The storm, it appeared, was only just beginning. The sky darkened even further as Peter stepped into the light cast by a flickering street lamp, his silhouette a dreadful reminder of past betrayals. My heart raced, the steadiness of my resolve wavered, as I felt the weight of his presence flowing through the air like poison, infecting every hopeful thought I dared to nurture. I'd once trusted him, an ally turned adversary now lurking amidst the chaos. "What are you doing here?" Richard's growl cut through the clamor, a protective edge sharpening his tone. Behind him, the officer attempted to rise, gripping the blade embedded in his side, his strength clearly waning. Peter's lips curled into a sinister smirk, a fleeting flicker of amusement crossing his face beneath the veiling storm. "Just checking in on my favorite little project," he said, sarcasm dripping from his words. "You know, I always called it survival of the fittest." With each deliberate step he took toward us, the shadows seemed to dance around him, imbued with malicious energy. The pressure twisting in my chest threatened to choke me. I fought back the urge to tremble. "You don't belong here, Peter," I said, my voice but a whisper lost in the wind. "Oh, but this is where the real fun begins, isn't it?" He laughed, a sound that echoed and blended seamlessly with the bubbling impending darkness, drawing the figures lingering behind him into even sharper focus. They leaned forward, eyes glistening with an insatiable hunger for chaos. Dread slithered up my spine, but Richard stood his ground, fists clenched and jaw set. "Get away from her, Peter," he warned, his expression fierce with the kind of conviction that made my heart swell, even amid the storm's shadows. "Listen to the brave hero," Peter mocked, glancing at Richard with feigned admiration. "You think you can protect her?" He waved his hand dismissively, and the men following him shifted their weight, echoing the challenge in his eyes. "You may have thought you were pathing away to power, but you're about to realize it's a dead end," I shot back, surprised by the fire igniting within me. "Ah, but you underestimate how deep my roots run," he replied, his voice silky smooth, laced with menace. "Or how far I'm willing to go to get what I want." Rain fell heavier now, blurring our frenzied faces as it dripped down like a curtain separating us from the outside world, each drop a reminder that the storm was as volatile as our situation. Distant sirens wailed, but the ocean of noise around us tugged at my thoughts, drawing them deeper into turmoil. Suddenly, the officer stumbled again, his weight shifting precariously as an ominous silence swept through the street, a moment of calm before utter chaos. "You need to go, Claudia, Richard," he gasped, eyes wide with urgency as he clutched at his wound. "Leave now while you still can." "No." I shouted back, my voice rising, driven by raw emotion. "We're not leaving you." A cold laugh slipped from Peter's lips as he observed our exchange, delight dancing across his features. "How noble," he scoffed, "but how far will that loyalty get you?" In a moment of utter clarity, the kind that comes only when facing the abyss, I realized that our connection was both a curse and a savior. "Richard," I breathed, desperation sparking in my chest. "We need a plan. Together." But the weight of betrayal hung between us as Peter's men surged, emboldened by my momentary vulnerability. We braced ourselves for the impact, adrenaline coursing through our systems, preparing to stand against a tide that sought to drown us. Then, just as though the very heavens above had listened to our plight, a blinding flash of lightning illuminated the night sky, rupturing the darkness. For a brief moment, everything stood still, clarity mingling with confusion, a chance to seize an opportunity. "Follow my lead," Richard shouted, his determination slicing through the chaos. He glanced at me, and though uncertainty marked his expression, the fire ignited within his gaze gave me hope once more. My resolve tethered to his, I nodded together we would confront this. As we sprang into action. Adrenaline surged through my veins, and shattered remnants of fear scattered behind us. But just as we dashed toward freedom, Peter's voice cut through the storm's whispers like a knife. You think you can run from me? You'll only bring this upon yourselves. A twinge of ice formed in my gut, the weight of his words lingering ominously in the air. Fear, pain, and anger collided within me, threatening to devour but also igniting a fierce will to push forward, no matter the cost. As Richard and I fought against the swirling shadows, I felt a pulse of possibility break through the storm's deafening clamor. But as we rushed toward the alley's mouth, distant sounds morphed, deepening with sinister intent. I turned, just in time to catch Peter's wicked smile, as he slipped a small device from his pocket, a remote, glimmering ominously in the drowning rain. And then, the unmistakable sound of metal clicking echoed through the chaos. My heart plummeted as realization slammed into me like a freight train, the rain mingling with fear, wrapping around us like shackles. No! I screamed, mere moments away from the unfolding nightmare. The storm wasn't just raging outside, it was closing in on us, sparked by someone who had once been a part of my life, threatening to unleash devastation as thunder roared overhead. The rain lashed against the pavement with a relentless fury, each droplet a promise of the chaos that was to ensue. My heart raced, the wild thrum of adrenaline thrumming in my ears drowning out the laughter that erupted from Peter's lips. The remote shimmered like a beacon of doom against the backdrop of the storm, sending a chill deep into my bones. Claudia, focus. Richard's voice sliced through the haze, harsh yet grounding. He grabbed my hand and pulled me toward the adjoining alley, urgency flooding his movements. But my feet felt glued to the ground, I couldn't shake the guilt crashing over me like the rain. Richard, what if he presses that button? I gasped, desperation clawing at my throat. We can't, we have to. Now. His grip tightened around my wrist, and for a moment, I was grateful for the anchor he provided amid the whirlwind. As we stumbled deeper into the alley, my mind fought between the fear of Peter's following puppets and the aching thought of the officer left behind. His pain was real, a stark truth searing my conscience. But we couldn't dwell on that now, our fight for survival had devolved into instinct that we turned sharply, navigating through a narrow passageway illuminated by flickering neon signs. The storm's sound intensified, but amidst all of it, I caught whispers of laughter and not of mischief unleashed by Peter's goon squad. I shuddered at the thought. Do you think they'll find him? I whispered, guilt threatening to drown me in its depths. The officer stop. Richard hissed, tightening his hold on my wrist, his expression fierce. We have to keep moving. We can't help him if we're dead. A harsh reality tugged at my heart. I nodded again, pushing the haunting image of the officer's face aside. I steeled myself, determined to disentangle from the web of despair enveloping us. But just as we reached a corner, we skidded to a halt. A figure loomed ahead, one of Peter's men, smirking malevolently, casually leaning against a wall as if enjoying his triumphant catch. This was a blockade we hadn't anticipated. Looks like the little birdies need a guide, he taunted, stepping into the weak light, arms crossed, satisfied arrogance radiating off him. Watch out! Richard's warning rang out too late as the man lunged toward us. But Richard instinctively pushed me aside, bracing himself for impact. The moment stretched infinitely as I watched helplessly, dread coursing through every vein. There was a sharp thud followed by the sickening sound of flesh meeting metal. I gasped, my heart lodging in my throat as Richard fell backward with a grunt. The scuffle broke into chaos, I leapt toward Richard, shielding him as panic coursed through my veins. Get up. We need to move. I urged, my voice wavering. I'm fine, he managed through gritted teeth. Even as pain flickered in his eyes, he fought back, rising surprisingly quickly. But no sooner had he regained his footing than Peter's man retaliated, a glimmer of steel in his hand. No more games. The man growled, preparing to strike again. In that instant, an unexpected flicker of hope sparked within me, a bay of light amid the shadows. I glanced over at Richard, determined to act, and suddenly the adrenaline surged anew. Without thinking, I snatched a discarded metal rod from the ground, adrenaline rekindling the fire within. I swung the rod with everything I had, colliding with the attacker's arm. The man yelped, dropping his weapon as he staggered back, shock painted on his face. I didn't wait, I grabbed Richard's hand, pulling him toward the opposite side of the alley. But even as we escaped, the air thickened with the scent of damp earth and uncertainty. I could still hear Peter's laughter ringing in my ears, mocking us from the shadows. Despair hovered just beyond our grasp, and I felt it like a chilling wind, whispering doubts of our chances. "We can't let him win," Richard urged under his breath. His voice was steady, but a tremor underlined the words. "No matter what it takes, Claudia, we have to find a way." And as we ducked under an awning, the rain still pounding. With ferocity, I felt the weight of those words sink into my chest. Hope might flicker, but it would not extinguish. Suddenly, my phone buzzed violently in my pocket. It was a message from an unknown number. I stole a glance at Richard, who was still scanning the alley for any sign of pursuit. Heart brimming with anxiety, I risked a look at the screen, and the world narrowed into a singular moment. "Get out now. I know where Peter is taking you." The words jolted me like lightning before a storm, and I looked back up to Richard, the sudden urgency perforating the air. "We have to move, but we have to hurry. Someone knows where Peter might be going next." "Who?" Richard asked, eyes narrowing with suspicion. Suddenly, a chilling realization washed over me, a name that cast long shadows over my past. "It cannot be," I whispered, dread creeping into my core. Before I could share the revelation, the sound of footsteps echoed ominously down the alleyway, harsh and unyielding. My breath hitched as the sense of hope faded, replaced by the overwhelming surge of darkness. Together we faced the encroaching danger, unaware that the storm was only just beginning to reveal its true nature. The atmosphere thickened with every step the shadowy figure took. Richard's grip tightened around my hand, both a promise of support and a reminder of the fear lurking in the edges of our reality. The footsteps drew nearer, each echo ricocheting off the narrow alley walls, turning the once comforting rhythm of rain into an oppressive drumbeat of dread. "What now?" Richard murmured, eyes scanning for an escape. He was still wounded, the fading light catching the sheen of sweat on his brow. I glanced at the retreating shadows, momentarily paralyzed by uncertainty. The message had ignited a flicker of hope, but the looming threat felt like a weight pressing down on both our chests. "We can't stay here. We need to find cover, somewhere we can regroup." Before I could finish my thought, a rough laugh cut through the tension. The dark figure rounded the corner, a member of Peter's entourage, and he wasn't alone. Two more men followed, their grins cruel and confident, the kind born from being the predator in a world enclosing around us like a tightening noose. "Looks like the little birds finally found their corner," one of them sneered, stepping closer, as if savoring the moment before a kill. "Run!" Richard shouted, breaking the spell binding my feet to the ground. Here was an urgency we couldn't ignore. We bolted into the night, adrenaline surging through our veins as our feet slapped against the wet pavement. I could feel the pulse of the city drown out everything else. The dim lights blurred into streaks of color, as the storm my heart fought against mirrored the chaos swirling around us. Richard led the way, weaving through the maze of alleyways and storefronts, but even as we turned corners and pushed onward, a creeping sense of hopelessness threatened to claw back into my mind. What if we were cornered? What if there was no way out? Out of the corner of my eye, I spotted a narrow entrance to a cafe, its neon sign flickering erratically in the relentless rain. "In here!" I yelled, tugging on Richard's arm, and we dove through the door just as a shout rang out behind us. The cafe was dimly lit, filled with the aroma of coffee and stale pastries, but the warmth inside felt suffocating compared to the storm outside. Ducking behind a table, we pressed our backs to the cold, tiled wall, breathless, clinging to the momentary safety. "Claudia," Richard panted, eyes wide, that message. It means someone cares enough to warn us. We need to figure out who it is and how they know us. My mind raced, the reality settling on me like a heavy cloak. But who? Who could possibly? Suddenly, I remembered. A name slipped from my lips without thinking. Elena. My sister. She works for a law firm that has some dealings with Peter's company. If anyone knows what is going on. But before I finished, Richard's gaze hardened. We can't count on anyone. We don't know who might be compromised. What if she's in danger? Tears pricked at my eyes at the thought of my sister, safe in her own world while I was trapped in this terrifying storm, both physical and emotional. I need to know she is safe. The words tumbled out in a rush, desperation clawing for an outlet. Richard pressed his lips into a thin line, though concern pooled in his expression. I could see he understood my fear, how deep family ties ran in the face of a cold reality. We will figure it out. Just give me a second. Breathless moments dripped by, each second taut with tension as we listened for any signs that Peter's men had followed us inside. The cafe was quiet, but the storm outside roared on, almost as if taunting our vulnerability. And then I caught it, a soft ping from my phone echoing against the tile floor. I fished it from my pocket, glancing quickly at the screen. A message from the same unknown number buzzed with urgency. Get to the old warehouse at the docks. Trust no one. Richard, I whispered, staring at the screen with wide eyes. It's from the same person. His brow furrowed as he leaned in closer. That could be a trap. But they also seem to know secret paths. I hesitated. Trusting this unknown source felt like tossing a lifeline into an ocean of uncertainty. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it was my sister who needed me, and if this message connected to that, then my resolve hardened. Let us go, I decided, trembling. We need answers. We have to find Elena. The moment I pushed myself back to my feet, the doors swung open, and rain poured into the cafe like a tempest unleashed. But it wasn't Peter's men that entered, it was an unlikely figure from the shadows of my past. Elena, drenched and breathless, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and anger directed not only at the storm but at the path we had chosen. Claudia! She exclaimed, staggering forward. What have you gotten into? The storm raged outside, but standing there, the real tempest roared in my heart, a chasm of unspoken truths and fear of what lay ahead. And in that threshold, with my sister returning from the unknown depths of danger, a chilling realization settled. The storm had only just begun, and the secrets it held were more terrifying than I had ever imagined. The warehouse stood shrouded in darkness when we arrived, looming like a foreboding giant against the roiling clouds that still crackled with the remnants of the storm. Rain poured down in relentless torrents, drowning the world in noise, but I could feel a different kind of tension simmering in the air. The weight of the moment pressed heavily upon my chest. I was here, drawn into a web of danger and deceit, my heart pounding in time with the distant echoes of chaos. Elena's presence initially filled me with hope, but the expression on her face, the fear etched into her features, confirmed what I dreaded. Claudia, you shouldn't have come here. Her voice trembled as she reached for me, but the moment of reunion was eclipsed by the urgency of our circumstances. Richard stood at my side, a steadying presence ready to confront whatever threats lay ahead. I had to find you, I breathed, my heart racing at the thought of the peril we were all in. You're in danger because of me, because of everything stemming from Peter's choices. We could all be caught in the storm of his ambition. Things are spiraling out of control, she said, glancing behind us at the doorway where shadows danced ominously. Peter's obsession with power blinded him to the stakes, and if he finds out where you are. Her voice faded, horror pooling in her eyes. Then we stop him. Richard's words rang with unwavering resolve. We fight back. In this world, fighting back means playing a very dangerous game, Elena warned, her gaze darting nervously toward the street. He has eyes everywhere, and his men are ruthless. You both don't realize the risks you're undertaking. She turned to Richard, and for a moment, her fierce protection shifted into something softer, a warning wrapped in empathy. You have to promise me that you'll protect her. I will, he replied with unwavering certainty, the tension crackling in the air as both women whom I adored stood in defiance against the darkness that threatened to swallow us whole. But we need a plan, and if he knows where you are, we're running out of time. At this, Elena seemed to steel herself, eyes sharp, determination igniting anew. There's a way to outmaneuver him. I've been uncovering information from my firm's reports. Peter's targeting the docks tonight. He believes that keeping the shipments running through there will solidify his power. Then we have to warn them. I grasped her hands, shuddering with a mix of hope and urgency. Elena, if we can alert the authorities, perhaps we can know. This isn't about the authorities. She interrupted, shaking her head vehemently. Peter has them in his pocket. If you go to them, you're walking straight into a trap. You need to understand this is about surviving the night. About getting out of here alive. The weight of her revelation hung heavy, reality sinking deep into my marrow. The stakes had never been clearer. I looked to Richard, and he nodded, eyes unyielding. This wasn't just about me, it was about the three of us fighting for our lives against a man whose ambition had corrupted everything. That a low rumble of thunder echoed, and a flash of lightning illuminated the warehouse, casting long shadows that danced across the walls. What's needed now is a distraction, Richard said, a plan forming in his mind. Something that will draw them away, create chaos the way we did back in the alley. I swallowed hard, fear flickering deep within as I recognized the impending storm inside me, but determined to harness it for something greater. What if I go out and draw them to me? Like bait? No. Elena protested, her voice rising. Claudia, you can't. You're putting yourself in danger. I can handle it, I urged, feeling a rush of defiance overcome my trepidation. They won't expect me, I'll be safer than any of you. I can lead them away long enough for you two to figure out how to take him down. We can't be sidelined any longer. Richard's mouth turned into a grim line as he searched my face for any sign of doubt, but instead, he found resolve. This is insane, he murmured, yet something in his tone twisted. With admiration. But if we do this, we need to coordinate seamlessly. Elena, you must get to a vantage point where you can relay information back, I instructed. You can provide backup when we need it. No, she shook her head again, almost pleading. I want to let you face this alone, but I could feel the weight of the moment pressing against us. You have to trust me, I urged. If we're going to beat him, I cannot be the weakness in the chain. He knows me. I'll become the distraction he is unprepared for. With hesitation wrapped tightly around my words, I pushed forward as resolve overtook me. It was time to confront the storm head-on, not just the literal one raging outside, but the fury that dwelled within the very hearts of those who held my fate in their hands. Richard leaned closer, steadying my trembling hands with his own, his voice a low murmur. You have to promise me you'll come back. I'll play my part, and I'll be waiting for you. In that moment, the weight of our bond surged through the air, crackling with a vow that transcended any storm. I promise, I breathed, though its truth flickered uncertainly through my heart, and then I felt that the air shifted sharply as the cafe doors blasted open, ominously revealing figures cloaked in shadows advancing toward us, sinister smirks painted on their faces. There was no more time left, the storm we had anticipated was finally upon us. The stakes were about to be raised, and together we would face each tumultuous wave. Now! Richard urged, propelling me forward as Elena positioned herself closer to the back, steadying for her part in the plan. I could feel the pulse of the storm echoing in my veins, both exhilarating and terrifying, a frantic reminder that this was our moment to reclaim our lives from the clutches of chaos. The adrenaline surged as we moved into action. Each heartbeat echoed thunderously in my ears as I prepared to step into the fury where darkness met uncertainty, fully aware that the storm was nothing compared to the curiosity of a deeper conflict, but I was ready to rise above. Draw them in. Elena whispered, and those final words fueled my determination. A shroud of fear wafted around me, but hope began to break through, and as I stepped outside into the stormy embrace one last time, I made a mental vow: I would not let them take our lives, I would forge a new path to freedom amidst the turmoil. Because sometimes the fiercest storms reveal the light within us, and I refuse to be lost in the shadows any longer. The first rush of rain caught my face as I stepped outside, and I couldn't help but smile despite the peril imminent ahead. As thunder roared above, a new resolve blossomed deep within me. Even the fiercest storms would yield to the strength of those brave enough to fight through it. I was ready to confront everything that would come next, and at that moment, I knew I wasn't just surviving, I was reclaiming my destiny, emboldened by every heartbeat intertwined with those I loved. The storm had raged long enough, now it was time to dance through the rain and invite whatever came. As the darkness enveloped me, I turned back for a moment, searching Richard's gaze one last time. Amid the chaos, his eyes held a flicker of something that would stay with me even through the tempest ahead. A connection reaching beyond this night, tethered by love and fierce loyalty. That in a world where storms can drown us, we choose to rise above the chaos. In the confrontation with the darkest parts of ourselves, we birth hope anew. Together, I whispered, and my heart answered with a bold, resounding, always.